All right, hello, fourth and fifth grade. We read the last chapter of Number the Stars. It was 2 years after the other events in the book. The war had finally ended, and so um, it was just talking about the different celebrations and stuff that were going on in Copenhagen that day. Anne Marie learned the truth of her older sister Lisa's death. She found out her sister had actually been part of the resistance, just like Peter had been. We also learned that Peter had been caught and executed by Germans. So there was happy stuff and very sad stuff too. At the end of the chapter, she had gone into Lisa's trunk and found Ellen's broken Star of David necklace, and she asked her papa if he'd be able to fix it so that when Ellen and her family did finally come home, she'd be able to give it back to her. All right, so the book itself is done, but we are going to read the afterword today. So like I said, the afterword is going to be like a note from the author. The author of this book is Lois Lowry. She has written a ton of books. Probably besides this book as being one of her most famous ones is one called The Giver, which if you guys haven't read that book, that would be understandable because it's a little bit more for older kids. But you may have seen the movie. They did make a movie, a few years ago called The Giver, but it's based on her book. So anyways, in the afterword, Lois Lowry is going to tell us how she went about writing this book, what things she made up and what things she didn't. There will not be anything to do in the packet. You are done with this now. So as long as you've answered all those quiz time questions and sent them to me, you're good to go. So after we do the afterword today, you can either keep going today or you can use tomorrow, Thursday. You need to get on AR and you need to take the 2 quizzes that we always take for our book. The first one you need to take is the reading practice quiz. Make sure you're clicking the reading one. Some of you guys on the last book you had for reading groups, you clicked on one that said literacy. Don't do that one. You need to click on the one that says the reading practice quiz. Then after you do the reading quiz, you need to do the vocabulary quiz. So you can do that today, Wednesday, or tomorrow, Thursday. Okay? All right, so let's go ahead and just grab our books and follow along. The afterword starts on page 133. So again, this is from the author. It's like a letter to you. So how much of Anne Marie's story is true? I know I will be asked that. Let me try to tell you here where facts end and fiction begins. Fiction, of course, being made up. So Anne Marie Johansen is a child of my imagination, though she grew there from the stories told to me by my friend Annalise Platt, to whom this book is dedicated, who was herself a child in Copenhagen during the long years of the German occupation. So Anne Marie was not a real person, but she was based on the experiences of someone that Lois Lowry knew. And you might have caught this, that person's name was Annalise. So when Lois Lowry made her characters, she used part of the name to make up Anne Marie's, and then the other part to make up Lisa's. Okay, we're right here. I had always been fascinated and moved by Annalise's descriptions, not only of the personal deprivation that her family and their neighbors suffered during those years, and the sacrifices they made, but even more by the greater picture she drew for me of the courage and integrity of the Danish people under the leadership of the king they loved so much, Christian X. So I created little Anne Marie and her family, set them down in a Copenhagen apartment on a street where I have walked myself, and imagined their life there against the real events of 1943. Denmark surrendered to Germany in 1940. It is, turn your page, true. And it was true for the reasons that Papa explained to Anne Marie. The country was small and undefended with no army of any size. The people would have been destroyed had they tried to defend themselves against the huge German forces. So, surely with great sorrow, King Christian surrendered, and overnight the soldiers moved in. From then on, for 5 years, they occupied the country. Visible on almost every street corner, always armed and spit-shined, they controlled the newspapers, the rail system, the government, schools and hospitals, and the day-to-day existence of the Danish people. But they never controlled King Christian. It is true that he rode alone on his horse from the palace every morning, unguarded, and greeted his people. And though it seems so charming as to be a flight of the author's fancy, the story that Papa told Anne-Marie of the soldier who asked the Danish teenager, "Who is that man?" that story is recorded in one of the documents that still remain from that time. So it's true. It is true, too, that in August 1943, the Danes sank their own entire navy in Copenhagen harbor as the Germans approached to take over the ships for their own use. So that part, remember, way back, Kirsty thought that there had been fireworks for her birthday. That's how she remembered it, because she was so young, because she heard all these explosions and stuff going on. And her mom just let her think that. But Anne-Marie, being a little bit older, knew that it was actually the Danish people bombing their own ships so that the Germans wouldn't be able to take control of them and then use the ships against them. You remember that part? So that was true. That really did happen. So right here. My friend Annalise remembers it, and many who were children at the time would have been awakened, as little Kirsty was, by the explosions and the fiercely lighted sky as the ships burned. On the new year of the Jewish high holidays in 1943, those who gathered to worship at the synagogue in Copenhagen, as the fictional Rosens did, were warned by the rabbi that they were to be taken and relocated by the Germans. The rabbi knew because a high German official told the Danish government, which passed the information along to the leaders of the Jewish community. The name of that German was G.F. Dukewitz, and I hope that even today, so many years later, there are flowers on his grave because he was a man of compassion and courage. So what she means is there was a German official who essentially betrayed his own country, risked his own life, so that he could warn the Danish government about what the plan was for the Jewish people. So that was very brave of him to go against his country, because he knew it was the wrong thing to do. He knew it wasn't right. So, right, so right here. And so the Jews, all but a few who didn't believe the warning, fled the first raids. They fled into the arms of the Danes, who took them in, fed them, clothed them, hid them, and helped them along to safety in Sweden. So all that stuff happened. In the weeks following the Jewish New Year, almost the entire Jewish population of Denmark, nearly 7,000 people, were smuggled across the sea to Sweden. So in other words, 7,000 people were helped to escape to Sweden, like the Rosens were. That's a lot. The little hand-hemmed linen handkerchief that Anne-Marie carried to her uncle, surely that was something made up by an author who wanted to create a heroine out of a fictional little girl. No, the handkerchief as well is part of history. It's true. Everything about the handkerchief stuff is true. After the Nazis began to use police dogs to sniff out hidden passengers on the fishing boats, Swedish scientists worked swiftly to prevent such detection. They created a powerful powder composed of dried rabbit's blood and cocaine. And cocaine is an illegal drug. The blood attracted the dogs, and when they sniffed at it, the cocaine numbed their noses and destroyed, temporarily, their sense of smell. Almost every boat captain used such a permeated handkerchief, and many lives were saved by that device. So the blood would attract the dogs, they would sniff the handkerchief, and then that drug would temporarily numb their sense of smell, so they wouldn't be able to find anybody on the ships. That was all true. The secret operations that saved the Jews were orchestrated by the Danish resistance, which, like all resistance movements, was composed mainly of the very young and very brave. Peter Nielsen, though he is fictional, represents those courageous and idealistic young people, so many of whom died at the hands of the enemy. So the resistance was real. In reading of the resistance leaders in Denmark, I came across an account of a young man named Kim Malthe-Brun, who was eventually captured and executed by the Nazis when he was only 21 years old. So I'd make an inference that Peter Nielsen's character is based on what she learned about this boy, or this man, Kim Malthe-Brun. And here's why. So I'm right here. I read his story as I had read many others, turning the pages, skimming here and there, this sabotage, that tactic, this capture, that escape. After a while, even courage becomes routine to the reader. But then, quite unprepared, I turned the page and faced a photograph of Kim Malthe-Brun. He wore a turtleneck sweater, and his thick, light hair was windblown. His eyes looked out at me, unwavering on the page. Seeing him there, so terribly young, broke my heart. But seeing the quiet determination in his boyish eyes made me determined, too, to tell his story, and that of all the Danish people who shared his dreams. So, I would like to end this with a paragraph written by that young man in a letter to his mother the night before he was put to death. And I want you all to remember that you must not dream yourselves back to the times before the war, but the dream for you all, young and old, must be to create an ideal of human decency, and not a narrow-minded and prejudiced one. That is the great gift our country hungers for, something every little peasant boy can look forward to, and with pleasure feel he is a part of something he can work and fight for. Surely that gift, the gift of a world of human decency, is the one that all countries hunger for still. I hope that this story of Denmark and its people will remind us all that such a world is possible. So, being good people, right? Okay. So that's that. So much of this book is true. The characters may have been made up, but even they were based on real people. A great historical fiction novel that you can learn a lot from. And then I hope you keep in your mind as you get older and take history classes that involve learning about World War II. All right, so like I said, there's nothing to do in the packet. Your packet is done. What you need to do either now or tomorrow, if you'd rather, is log into AR and take the reading practice quiz. Make sure it says reading, and then the vocabulary quiz. All right, good luck. Thanks.